Volume 2, Book 6, The Marseillaise. Chapter 1, Executive that does not act. Wherefore the old discord and ferment, of Fouillant's sympathy for royalty and Jacobin's sympathy for fatherland, acting against each other from within, with terror of Coblentz and Brunswick acting from without. This discord, ferment, must hold on its course, till a catastrophe do ripen and come. So Fouillantism is the constitutional monarchists. Jacobin obviously represent the most extreme element of the Republicans. Consider therefore this pitiable 20th of June, which we saw close out the previous part, as a futility, no catastrophe, rather a katastasis. In Greek tragedy, the katastasis was the part of the action leading directly to the catastrophe. Sort of prelude to the catastrophe is the katastasis. That's what Carlyle believes the 20th of June was, where they sans-culottes confronted the king in his palace in the Tuileries, stared him straight in the face and saw that ultimately he was no king. Fear factor, the awe-inspiring factor, everything that's contained within the word majesty to a king had left this man's, Louis says, had left his soul. Probably on hearing the scandalous 20th of June, Lafayette has quitted his command in the north frontier, in better or worse order, and got hither on the 28th to repress the Jacobins. So Lafayette hears how bad the revolution's going, that the revolution is continuing without a base. Remember, he is the figure of patriotism. He will put down the street mobs. And so he's at the frontier. War has already been declared in Austria, who of course have the Austrian Netherlands, so it's sort of Belgium, modern-day Belgium. So he's up on the northern frontier fighting them. And when he hears of this, he returns home to try his patriotism once more. What no Sieur Rasson nor Mother Society can do more than guess is this, that a council of rank Fouillants, your unabolished staff of the guard and who else has status and weight, is in these very moments privily deliberating at the generals. Can we not put down the Jacobins by force? On the morrow, which is Saturday, there turn out some 30, and depart shrugging their shoulders. Lafayette promptly takes carriage again, returns musing on many things. So he does have this scene where he goes back to Paris, but ultimately assesses the situation and does not put down Jacobin fervent by patriotism. Perhaps it was because he saw patriotism didn't work. This was a bit more sophisticated than a mere street mob. Or perhaps it was because he didn't find the support at the crucial moment. Carlyle kind of leaves that open there. But it's an interesting what if. Before sunset, patriots have burnt him in effigy. So Lafayette is no more their saviour. If we go back to the Feast of the Pikes, which is part 8, the Fête de la Fédération, he was the one swearing the oath. He was the main man, really, their hero. That was only the summer of 1790, and now we're in 1792. So 2 years on, and he's already being burnt in effigy. Such is the chaos of a revolution. Department Directory is here at Paris, who on the 6th of July takes upon them to suspend Mayor Pétion and procure Emmanuel from all civic functions. Pétion sees himself as a kind of martyr. His Majesty has to write almost at the same night, asking a reconciled assembly for advice. The reconciled assembly will not advise and will not interfere. Official Fouillantism falters not a whit, but carries its head high, strong in the ladder of the law. Fouillants, all of these men, a Fouillant Directory, founding on a high character and such like, with Duc de la Rochefoucauld for president. This is the rally of the constitutional monarchs. Duc de Liancourt offers out of Normandy, where he is Lord Lieutenant, not only to receive his Majesty, thinking of it further, but to lend him money. And then there's this other idea they have. How about let the Fête de la Fédération worked for us in 1790, right? Let's create another one of these as a ruse to be an actual more cohesive muster than the one we saw when Lafayette came back to Paris. So, here it is in Carlyle's words. Another phasis which we note in these early July days is that of certain thin streaks of Federate national volunteers wending from various points towards Paris to hold a new Federation festival, or Feast of Pikes on the 14th there. So has the National Assembly wished it, so has the nation willed it. Cannot these fédérés, having celebrated their Feast of Pikes, march on to Soissons, and they're being drilled and regimented, rush to the frontiers, or whether we like? So, the or whether we like there is kind of important. You've got a lot of marching men. France is at war. whoever gathers these forces that are coming to Paris for this supposed Fête de la Fédération 2.0, whoever manages to galvanize these will probably be the one who seizes the reins of power within Paris. As did the other veto about priests, which we had in the previous part, where the king kept vetoing the abolishment of priests and the priestly class, really, and the taking of their lands, is also like to be eluded and without much cunning, for provincial assemblies, in Calvados, in one instance, are proceeding on their own strength to judge and banish anti-national priests. So the priests are taking apart their own. Or still worse, without provincial assembly, a desperate people as at Bordeaux can hang two of them on the lanterne. Sort of natural, if you do not act, we will reaction from within the clergy. That's quite interesting. You think about cultural osmosis, how before now we've treated the clergy and the priestly caste of France as solely reactionary, but within them, because now France is particularly in a state of war, there are people who think you're being anti-national at this point, and even if you are a priest, you see your duty to be for France and to fight against Austria in this war. So other actors are actually against you. So even though the National Assembly does not act, we see rogue actors work for the idea of the nation independently. And so it is a paralytic France. This thin green streaks, not thick joyful ranks as of the first Feast of Pikes. So the recruits from the hinterland are coming into Paris. No, these poor federates march now towards Austria and Austrian committee, towards jeopardy and forlorn hope, men of hard fortune and temper, not rich in the world's goods. There is an angry buzz and simmer, uneasy tossing and moaning, of a huge France all enchanted, spellbound by unmarching constitution into frightful conscious and unconscious magnetic sleep, which frightful magnetic sleep must now issue soon in one of two things, death or madness. Danton and the unlimited patriots, down deep in their subterranean region of plot, whither they have now divvied and dived, they want to seize this from the other hand. So on one hand you had Lafayette and the Feuillants, now you've got Danton and the Jacobins. Brunswick is on the eve of marching. That's Brunswick, the enemy. With 80,000, they say, fell Prussians, Hessians, fellow of emigrants, general of the great Frederick. Such an army, and our armies, our generals? As for Lafayette, on whose late visit a committee is sitting and all France is jarring and censuring, he seems readier to fight us than to fight Brunswick. We have Luckner, and he has ordered Dumouriez down with him. Dumouriez, with the Austrians hanging close on him, he busy, meanwhile training a few thousands to stand fire and be soldiers, declares that, come of what will, he cannot obey. Will a poor legislative, therefore, sanction Dumouriez, or sanction Luckner, these Lafayette movements? So there are movements happening in the frontiers that the people in Paris, revolutionaries, no longer agree with. They no longer trust any of these. We've reached the 11th of July. There is a decree that the country be, with all dispatch, declared in danger. So a sort of state of emergency. In danger truly, if ever a country was, says Carlyle. Chapter 2. Let us march. The notablest of all these moving phenomenon is that of Barbaro's 600 Marseillaise, who know how to die. So Barbaro is a revolutionary leader and galvanizer from the south of France, who you recall was involved in the quelling of Avignon and Arles back in the previous part. He's got these men together, prompt to the request. Barbaro, the Marseille municipality have got them together. On the 5th morning of July, the town hall says, Marchez, abattez le tyran. March, strike down the tyrant. And they, with grim approbate marchand, we march. Enfants de la patrie, they are called. 517 able men with captain of 50s and 10s, and musket on shoulder. They have left the sunny Phocian city and sea haven, with its bustle and its bloom. They wend on their wild way from the extremity of French land through unknown cities towards unknown destiny. Much wondering at this phenomenon, and how, in a peaceable trading city, so many householders and hearth-holders do severally fling down their crafts and industrial tools, gird themselves with weapons of war, and set out on a journey of 600 miles to, quote, strike down the tyrant, close quote. You search in all historical books, pamphlets, and newspapers for some light on it. Unhappily without effect. Rumour and terror precede this march. So already Carlyle is elevating this march of the Marseillaise into a state of myth, which still echo on you. The march itself an unknown thing. Weber, in the black stairs of the Tuileries, has understood that they were faussas, galley slaves, mere scoundrels. These Marseillaise, that as they marched through Lyon, people shut their shops. Men of regular life or of the best-filled purse they could hardly have been, admits Carlyle. But they did know how to die. So vague are all these. We have, Moniteur, Histoire Parlementaire, these are his sources. They are as good as silent on this, as to who really the Marseillaise were. Garrulous history, as too usual, will say nothing where you most wish her to speak. And that's really a key Carlylean take. At pivotal moments in history, a mythos does arise, and the books can't explain it. Sometimes it's in the form of a crucial coup, where letters and so on are actually burnt. Dispatches, a lot of things were said through the word of mouth, so there are no facts on the ground. But Carlyle, of course, takes it more as a metaphysical relationship between man and history. At the crucial moments where you really need to find out the facts, there are strange, absent elements. This is such one case. They wend, mid the infinitude of doubt and dim peril, they not doubtful. So, because they know how to die, they are marching through a doubtful France with conviction, and stand out for that. Fate and feudal Europe have decided, come girdling in from without, they, having also decided, do march within. This is the march of the Marseillaise, luckiest musical composition ever promulgated. So the hymn, of course, is created around them. The sound of which will make the blood tingle in men's veins, and the whole armies and assemblages will sing it, with eyes weeping and burning, with hearts of defiant death, despot, and devil. Paralytic national executive set into action. They must strike down whatsoever tyrant or martyrdom, fainéant, there may be, who paralyzes it. Fainéant being an idler. Chapter 3. Some consolation to mankind. Of the Federation feast itself we shall say almost nothing. Virtuous Mayor Pétion, whom Feuillantism had suspended, was reinstated only last night by decree of Assembly. Vive Pétion, and even Pétion au death, Pétion ou la mort. Poor Louis, who has waited till 5 o'clock before the Assembly would arrive, swears the national oath this time, with a quilted cuirasse under his waistcoat, which will turn pistol bullets. So that there's the threat that he already could get assassinated by a rogue actor already. We are in the last days of Louis. No cry of Vive le Roi salutes the ear. Cries only of Vive Pétion. Mayor Pétion, named on hats, is at his zenith in this federation. Lafayette again is close up upon his nadir. It is Sunday the 22nd of July, 1792. There is a flag flapping mournfully. Citoyen la patrie est en danger. Young patriotism, culotic and sans-culotic, rushes forward emulous. That is my name. Name, blood, and life is all my country's. So really, it's a muster. So with Vive la patrie, vive la liberté, stone Paris reverberates like ocean in his caves. Let the sections and primary assemblies at any rate become permanent. They do become permanent, and sit continually in Paris, and over France by legislative decree dated Wednesday the 25th. Successive, simultaneous dirl of 30,000 muskets, shouldered prance and jingle of 10,000 horsemen, fanfaronading emigrants in the van, drum, kettle drum, noise of weeping, swearing, and the immeasurable lumbering clank of baggage wagons and camp kettles that groan into motion. All this is Brunswick shaking himself. Oh, Brunswick, what words thou writest and blusterest! In this Paris, isn't it in this old Nineveh? There are so many scores that know not the right hand from the left. Nor is royal and imperial Prussian, Austrian declaration wanting. Serene highnesses, who sit there, protocoling and manifesting and consoling mankind. Chapter 4, Subterranean. Vive la nation! Young valor streaming towards the frontiers, patrie en danger, mutely beckoning in the Pont Neuf. Sections are busy in their permanent deep. Unlimited patriotism is seeking salvation in plot. This is Danton and his rogue. Danton replaced Mirabeau, recall, in Carlyle's mind as the true king. of France. Committee, self-chosen, is sitting at the side of the Golden Sun. Journalist Camille Desmoulins, Alsatian waterman, friend of Danton, American fernier of Martinique, a committee not unknown to Mayor Pétion. So Mayor Pétion has been reinstated. Friantism has not managed to suppress him for long. And he knows about this subterranean sort of shadow cabinet almost. And it is a shadow cabinet, not in the British sense, but in the fact that it is in the shadows, or as Carlyle states, subterranean. Not unknown to Procureur Manuel, least of all to Procureur Substitute Danton. He, wrapped in darkness, being also official, bears it on his giant shoulders, cloudy, invisible, atlas of the whole. Much is invisible, the very Jacobins have their reticences. Look at the Tuileries and the Tuileries Gardens, silent all as Sahara. None entering save by ticket. They shut their gates after the day of black breeches, a thing they had the liberty to do. Another subterranean character, Marat, Jean-Paul Marat, he People's Friend, who wrote in the periodical People's Friend, and the King's Friend, Royaux, Croc, and Counter Croc. So Royaux is sort of a anti-Marat. For the man Marat, though long hidden since the Champ de Mars massacre, is still alive. So that's been a year ago, I believe. The Champ de Mars massacre is the summer of 1791, and was a quelling of Republicans who wanted to turn France into a republic after it was decreed that the king, Louis, would remain a constitutional monarch even after his attempted flight to Varennes. O brave Barbaro, wilt thou not smuggle me to the Marseillaise, disguised as a jockey? This is Marat. This is Marat, and such is Paris. The heart of our France, like to it, preternatural suspicion, doubt, disquietude, nameless anticipation from shore to shore. We have Marseillaise marching, dusty, unwearied, through the midst of it all. Chapter 5, At Dinner. We reached the 29th of the month. Marseillaise brethren actually came in sight, and Barbaroux, Santerre, and patriots have gone out to meet with grim wayfarers. Paris generally gave a brotherly welcome, of all which the indignant Tuileries may, by its ticket of entry, have warning. So other soldiers are kind of anxious by this entry into the Marseillaise, both not to be upstaged, but also anxious are people such as those who are in the guards of the Tuileries, right? These Marseillaise, as Carlyle has already stated, a sort of mythos has sprung about from their arrival into Paris. Are they just rogues? Are they galley slaves? They're patriots. What are they going to do? Busy are the central committees of Fédérés at the Jacobin Church, of sections at the town hall, reunion of Cara, Camille, and company of the Golden Sun. Busy like submarine deities, or call them mud gods, working there in the deep murk waters till the thing be ready. So there's this plot going on. Danton seems to know about it. Mayor Pétion seems to know about it. The Fouillants know nothing about it, really. A lot of men are coming into Paris, armed men, ostensibly for a muster so they can go out and face Austria. But there's this subterranean plot emerging concurrently with it. All Brissotins want forfeiture, with the little Prince Royal for king. So Brissotin is a movement now who want not the abolition of the monarchy, but the monarch to abdicate, and the little Prince Royal for king, and us for protector over him. Oh, well, there's the classic, right? Poor legislators with their legislature waterlogged, volcanic explosion charging under it. Forfeiture shall be debated on the 9th day of August. And meanwhile, the dinner is, that Carlyle names the chapter after, I believe, is these Marseillaise sort of arriving in the mess halls, and giving that sort of fear to the other soldiers. A grand proposal is on foot for the 100th time of carrying His Majesty to Rouen. The castle of Gaillon, Swiss, at Courbevoie are in readiness. So another, this is the counterplot. We get him not, we're not going to get him east. We're not going to get him to the Austrian forces anymore. There's a war on out there. There's no way he's going to get through that passage. But he could go northwest to Rouen, where there is a castle and a place to kind of keep himself. And from there, of course, you can quickly spring into the Channel and away. Chapter 6, The Steeples at Midnight, is a reference to Henry IV. In truth, despite this counterplot of getting him to Rouen, it's the insurrectionists, right, the Subterraneanists, who have their plan just about ripe, not the others. Legislator? A poor waterlogged legislator can pronounce nothing. On Wednesday, the 8th of August, after endless oratory once again, they cannot even pronounce accusation against Lafayette, but absolve him. Here, it patriotism. Suspicion roars tumultuous round the salle de manège. The mother society ceases speaking. Groups cease haranguing. Let the unlimited patriot look to his weapon. There's a squadron on the Pont Neuf with cannon. They shall turn their back to these Marseillaise coming across the river. It's the Marseillaise coming across the river towards Mayor Pétion. Some new 20th of June we shall have, so we're going to have a confrontation similar to the 20th of June, where they marched to, I believe, the Legislative Assembly, found it empty, then marched to the King's Tuileries. Sans-culottes it was that time. This time it's the Marseillaise. Only this time will it be more effectual. Probably the insurrection will not dare to rise at all, right? That's the comfort they're saying to themselves. Those who are absolving Lafayette, those who are wanting perhaps only an application from the king, and putting poor the young Prince Royal on the throne. It's the 9th of August. Night, 1792. The night, as Mayor Pétion walks here in the Tuileries garden, is, quote, beautiful and calm. Indeed, His Majesty's reception of him was of the roughest, though. Louis XVI knows what Pétion is, and he's not going to pretend he's on his side. The same metal that rang storm 220 years ago, but by Her Majesty's order then on St. Bartholomew's Eve. So the calmness doesn't last, right? The Marseillaise have been allowed to cross the bridge, and there's a clamour. Carlyle has compared it before these insurrections to the clamour of St. Bartholomew, but at least then he says it was on an order of a king that they put down the Protestants in St. Bartholomew Day's massacre of 1572. Now, 220 years on, it's by subterranean plot. Murat is pulling. Robespierre lies deep, invisible for the next 40 hours. Full power delegates, 3 from each section, 144 in all, have got gathered at the town hall about midnight. So they realise something's up, and they will gather, even though it's at a late hour. You cannot put off the insurrection, though. Swift now, therefore, let these actual old municipals on the side of full powers and mandate of the sovereign elective people lay down their functions, and this new 144 take them up. 2 only of the old, or at most 3 we retain. Mayor Pétion, for the present, walking in the Tuileries, Procureur Manuel, Procureur Substitute Danton, invisible atlas of the whole, as Carlyle keeps calling him. So these 3, it's interesting, isn't it? The 3 who managed to represent this new assembly, which happens up at midnight, happen to be the 3 who are also new about the subterranean plot. So this is the act of the insurrection. Insurrection is difficult, says Carlyle. Each individual uncertain even of his next neighbour, totally uncertain of his dissident neighbour, what strength is with him? What strength is against him? Certain only that, in case of failure, his individual portion is in the gallows. So when you cause an insurrection, actually, there's great chaos in the movement. Despite all the planning you've done, these will be there, these will be in this part of the city, and we'll get our plot. If it goes violent, we have our armory in this part of the city. We'll set in the legislative here. This is how we'll get in. All that kind of goes out the window. You need to trust the man next to you. Doubt, danger, atropos, and nox are the dominant feelings. Saint-Antoine, on the right side of the river, is uncertain of Saint-Marceau on that. Alas, a court of law, not book law, but primeval club law, crowds and jostles out of doors. So we had book law in the last book, Parliament first, and now we're going to have club law, right? The Jacobin Club are getting into power. All fretted to the hysterical pitch. Such court of law, and no other, clutches poor Mandat from his constables, beats him down, massacres him on the steps of the town hall. So, of course, an insurrection is not going to be bloodless, is it? In such hysterical humour, more blood will flow. 4 are massacred, as Mandat was. 2 ex-bodyguards, 1 dissipated abbé, 1 royalist pamphleteer, Sulot, known to us by name, able editor of Wit and Work. Poor Sulot. Such doings usher in the dawn of the 10th of August, 1792. Could not one proclaim martial law, then, to stop this? Not easily, for it now seems Mayor Pt13 is gone. So Mayor Pt13 is a crucial node that the insurrectionists had on their side here, because as mayor, as reinstated of mayor, after the Feuillants tried to get rid of him, he is the one who can call in martial law, but he wants the insurrection to occur. Sister Elizabeth takes the Queen to the window. Sister, see what beautiful sunrise, right over the Jacobin church in that quarter. How happy if the Tocsin did not yield. But Mandat returns not. He's been massacred, we know that. Pétion is gone. Much hangs wavering in the invisible balance. That invisible balance is a reference to the Iliad. About 5 o'clock, there rises from the garden of a kind of sound, as of a shout which had become a howl, and instead of Vive le Roi, were ending in Vive la Nation. Mon Dieu! Ejaculates the spectral minister. What is he doing down there? For it is His Majesty, gone down with the old Marshal Maillet to review the troops. This sort of last stand. Chapter 7. The Swiss. Unhappy friends, the Tocsin does yield, has yielded. Immeasurable born of the night. Saint Antoine on this side of the river, Saint Marceau on that, the black-browed Marseillaise in the van. Now new commandant Santerre, indeed has taken the seat at the town hall, who came up with Barbaroux. So Santerre did actually participate in storming the Bastille, so he's been there from the start, but now leading this van, he sees himself more front and centre for the first time in Carlyle's narrative. This insurrection of the 10th of August, 1792, this attack on the Tuileries, this is his real moment. Whereat Mandat's squadron, that wanted to charge, not a squadron of them stirs, or they stir in the wrong direction, out of the way. If indeed His Majesty would consent to go over to the assembly, His Majesty above all, Her Majesty cannot agree to that. The tide advances. Remember, this is an assembly that has been usurped. Syndic Roederer of all men straights grows straighter and straighter. Syndic Roederer goes out and comes in. Cannoneers ask him, are we to fire against the people? So Roederer is one of the leaders of this garrison, still loyal to His Majesty, the King's Guard. What's left of them, whatever they're called now, they keep changing name. We for our part cannot live and die. Think of this answer, O King Louis and King's ministers, and take a poor syndic's safe middle course towards the salle de manège. So, don't fire on the people. Go to the assembly. That is the ultimate advice. Meanwhile, marchons is what they hear. They march. But this time Carlyle puts it that it is the king that marches. King Louis, Queen, Sister Elizabeth, the two royal children, governess, these with Syndic Roederer, and officials of the department amid a double rank of National Guards. The king is going to the assembly. Make way. It has struck 8 on all clocks some minutes ago. The king has left the Tuileries forever. So he ultimately doesn't fire on the people. Oh, you stanch Swiss, ye gallant gentlemen in black. For what a cause are ye to spend and be spent? King's Guard can go no further than the bottom step there. Lo, deputation of legislators come out. He of the long pole is still by oratory. So the Swiss Guard escorted him to the Legislative Assembly, but they can't go inside the Legislative Assembly. That's where their jurisdiction ends. Royalty ascends. A blue grenadier lifts the poor little prince from the press. Royalty has entered in. Royalty has vanished forever from your eyes. King Louis is gone, say you, over to the Assembly. Well and good. But to the Assembly pronounce forfeiture of him, and what boots it? The Swiss stand fast, peaceable and yet immovable. The pantomime grows hotter and hotter, Marseillaise sabres flourishing by way of action. Hark! High thundering above all the din, 3 Marseillaise cannon from the Carrousel, pointed by a gunner of bad aim, and come rattling over the roofs. Ye Swiss, therefore, fire! So while the Swiss are outside, they've escorted Louis to the Assembly, but because this is an insurrection, now the Marseillaise turn on the Swiss Guard who are waiting outside for Louis to return from the Assembly. Think what a volley, reverberating doomful of the 4 corners of Paris, and through all hearts, like a clang of Bellona's thongs, the black-browed Marseillaise rallying on the distance have become black demons that know how to die. Vengeance, victoire ou le mort. Patriot onlookers have their misgivings. What strangest patriot onlooker thinks that the Swiss, had they a commander, would beat? He is a man not unqualified to judge. The name of him, Napoleon Bonaparte. The Marseillaise fall wounded, but Barbaroux has surgeons. Ultimately, they were ready for the insurrection more than the Swiss. Towards the Tuileries and Swiss, written order of His Majesty to cease firing. O ye hapless Swiss! Why was there no order not to begin it? Gladly would the Swiss cease firing, but who will bid mad insurrection cease firing? To insurrection you cannot speak, neither can it hydra-headed hear. This is the classic. The order comes out from the assembly. His Majesty has told you to stop firing, Swiss guards. Swiss guards, they're under attack now. Who's going to tell an insurrection to stop firing? It can't even hear a thing. It's got pure... This is the doubt, the knocks, the apropos that Carlyle said is feasting inside of the minds and sinews, tissues of those of the insurrection. They're not going to stop. Dead and dying by the hundred lie all around and born bleeding through the streets. Patriot Paris roars, vengeance. Terror and fury rule the hour. The Swiss, pressed on from without, paralysed from within, have ceased to shoot, but not to be shot. The red porters of hotels are shot at, be they Swiss by nature or Swiss only in name. What he's getting at is that some of the porters at the hotels, according to Moore, who are called Swiss, although most of them are Frenchmen, have been killed by the undiscriminating fury of the mob. Red Swiss, breaking in the confusion of opinions, dispersing into blackness and death. He was no king of yours, that Louis, says Carlyle. He forsook you like a king of shred and patches. The king of shred and patches being a direct quote from Hamlet. Chapter 8. Constitution burst in pieces. Thus is the 10th of August won and lost. Patriotism reckons it slain by the thousand on thousand. So deadly was the Swiss fire from these windows, but will finally reduce them to some 1,200. So this is again, we saw this in the Champ de Mars massacre, where they were exaggerating numbers, the Patriots, because they won the narrative, they won the war. Carlyle thinks they've done the same on this 10th of August insurrection. How deluge of frantic sansculottism roared through all the passages of the Tuileries, ruthless in vengeance. How the valets were butchered, hewn down. 180 bodies of the Swiss are piled there, naked, unremoved till the second day. Patriotism has torn their red coats into snips, and marches with them at the pike's point. That ghastly bare corpses lie there, under the sun, under the stars, the curious of both sexes crowding round to look. What a moment for an august legislative was that, when the hereditary representative entered, under the such circumstances, and the grenadier, carrying the little Prince Royal out of the press, set him down on the assembly table. So, we've had the insurrection, but now we need the final piece, which will close off Volume 2 of the French Revolution, as Carlyle puts it, that of the Constitution. The legislative, the internal mechanisms of the Legislative Assembly in making this Constitution, making it march, that needs to now collapse. The Constitution is not permitting us to debate while the King is present. Finally, he settles himself with the family in the Loge of Logograph, in the reporter's box of a journalist, which is beyond the enchanted constitutional circuit, separated by a rail. So they can't debate while the King's present, so he sits behind this rail, which is reserved for a journalist, and that technically he's not present anymore, even though he's there. This is just a pointer that Carlyle makes as to how this Constitution is kind of disintegrating. And we see that when constitutions do disintegrate, there's still these weird call-outs to things which don't matter anymore. It's sort of tick-the-box exercise of it all. Vergniaud, he was at president a few hours ago, talked of dying for constitution authorities, has moved, as committee reporter, that of the hereditary representative to be suspended, that a national convention do forthwith assemble and say what further. So the Legislative Assembly is going to dissolve and be replaced by a national convention. The hereditary representatives dissolved. See you later. Amid this madness, Carlyle wonders if it was safer if Brunswick had just arrived and won the war. France sends up its blended shout responsive. The 10th of August shall be as the 14th of July, only bloodier and greater. How the statues of the kings do now fall. Bronze Henri himself, though he wore a cockade once, jingles down from the Pont Neuf, where the Patrie floats in danger. Much more does Louis XIV from the Place Vendôme jingle down, and even breaks in falling. curious can remark, written on his horse's shoe, deuxième haute, 1692, 1692. Century to the day. That was sort of the marker that was under the statue. It stood for 100 years. It was torn down. But a national convention will get itself together, and then what? We've had Legislative Assembly, National Assembly, we've had Parlement de Paris. How is this national convention really going to be any different? Without delay, however, let a new jury court and criminal tribunal to be set up in Paris to try the crimes and conspiracy of the 10th High Court of Orleans is distant and slow. I want to get rid of it, even though it's only new. The Minister of Justice is Danton. There you go. Robespierre, too, after victory, sits in the new municipality, insurrectionary improvised municipality, which calls itself Council General of the Commune. On Monday, 13th of August, 1792, in Mayor Pétion's carriage, Louis and his sad suspended household father thither. All Paris look at them as they pass through the Place Vendôme. Louis XIV statue lies broken on the ground. Pétion is afraid the Queen's looks may be brought scornful and produce provocation. She casts down her eyes. She does not look at all. So what this is on the 13th of August 1792, Louis XVI and his family were removed to the Temple prison, a century and a day after the date inscribed on the statue of Louis XIV, which has been tumbled down in the Place de Vendôme. French royalty vanishes within the gates of the temple, from which same towers poor Jacques Molay and his Templars were burnt out by French royalty 5 centuries ago. So it is an old prison, full of history. La Maison du Temple serait beaucoup plus commode, plus facile à garder, et que le roi y serait beaucoup plus en sûreté que partout ailleurs, as the history parlementaire says. Lafayette rises to the altitude of the situation at the head of his army. Legislative commissioners are posting towards him, and he orders the municipality of Sedan to arrest these commissioners. So Lafayette says, none of this is happening on my watch. Turn the army against them. Turn what of the army I hold against these insurrectionists. The Sedan municipals obey, but the soldiers of the Lafayette army, have, as all soldiers have, a kind of dim feeling that they themselves are sans-culottes in buff belts. That the victory of the 10th is also a victory for them. On the 18th, which is but next Saturday, Lafayette, with some 2 or 3 indignant staff officers, one of whom is the old constituent Alexandre de la Meth, having first put his lines into what order he could, rides swiftly over the marshes towards Holland. So I think Lafayette sends the orders, then quickly realizes they're not going to get obeyed. Those of the lower ranks within his own army are of the sans-culottic tendency. He rides to Holland. Rides, alas, swiftly into the claws of the Austrians. He, long, wavering, trembling on the verge of horizon, is set in Olmut's dungeons. So he's immediately imprisoned by the Austrians, found out, imprisoned. They don't trust him. This history knows him no more. Adieu, thou hero of 2 worlds. Lafayette leaves the scene forever, similar to the way Bailly did. Sedan municipals repent and protest. The soldiers shout Vive la Nation. Dumouriez, Polymétis, from his camp at Molde, sees himself made commander-in-chief. So Dumouriez, unlike Lafayette, decides not to go across the border to the enemy. He decides to stick it out after hearing about his insurrections, which could have gone either way again. But he's always a very self-serving character throughout all of this, Dumouriez, even though he is ultimately no friend of the Parisian advocacy class or the Jacobins. He is someone who likes climbing the ladder. So with Lafayette out of the picture, perhaps he thinks he can stick around to become commander-in-chief, which of course occurs. And New Brunswick, says Carlyle to round off this book, chapter and volume. What sort of military execution will Paris merit now? Forward, ye well-drilled, exterminatory men, with your artillery wagons and camp kettles jingling. Forward, tall, chivalrous king of Prussia, fanfaronading emigrants and war god Broglie, quote, for some consolation to mankind, close quote, which verily is not without need of some. And such as the Constitution burst into pieces, has constitutionalism failed in France. And we will head next time into Volume 3, Book 1, Volume 3 is The Guillotine. Book 1 is The September Massacres.